Welcome to From Students to Licensed Professionals, Protecting Your Rights.
Welcome to From Students to Licensed Professionals, Protecting Your Rights with attorney James Kosnett. James has represented students, parents, and families for decades, helping them navigate academic misconduct, allegations, expulsions, special education disputes, and other high-stakes school issues. I'm Lisa Mosby, and today we're talking about whether a college student can be expelled without a hearing and what the law actually requires. Hi, James. Welcome back.
Hi, Lisa. Nice to see you.
Thank you. Can a college student actually be expelled without a hearing, James?
Well, I actually helped establish the right in the state of California, the right of every college student or trade school student to a hearing before he or she is expelled. And this was a famous case called Campbell versus Career Development Institute in 2023. And it was reported in its published decision, and it's got precedent now. It's the law of the land that in the state of California, if you are a college student, undergraduate, for example, or a trade school student, maybe you're studying cosmetology or auto shop or computer technology, it doesn't have to be necessarily even a university or a college, but if you're in one of those schools, you cannot be dismissed without due process.
And
Let
James,
me
what
explain
does
what that is.
Yes,
Due
please do.
process is defined by our Supreme Court as notice and an opportunity to be heard in your own defense. It's not necessarily a hearing. For example, it could be by writing. It could be that you're given the opportunity to respond in writing and give your defense, but it's got to be some fair kind of process. The key word is fair. There's got to be a fair process in which you're informed of whatever the accusation is against you, that you cheated, that you were late to your clinical, that you abandoned your patient, that you just did something wrong at your teaching class, whatever it is. You have to know what the accusation is. You have to be given a copy of the relevant evidence. Could be a statement by somebody, could be a photograph, could be some kind of could be a clock punch-in time that you punched in and punched out, and they said that was something fraudulent about that. Whatever it is, they have to show that to you in advance, not the second before you respond, but in advance to give you time to look at it and think about it and get opposition to it, and the opportunity to present evidence and explanation in your own defense. That's the key.
And how do schools sometimes try to move forward without giving a student a full hearing?
That's the exception. It does happen. Most colleges and trade schools have a process that's written out. That's what they're supposed to have. The law requires them to have it. But sometimes a student just is told by a professor or by administrator, you're out. Don't bother coming back. Goodbye. And it's not even in writing. It's not even official. The student calls me up. They're very concerned, uh, which they should do. They should contact an attorney if something like that happens. Or they get an email or some notice saying, you have been disenrolled, you have been dismissed, without any indication of any kind of process or opportunity to say, hey, I don't, why did I do wrong? Or I'm sorry, it was a mistake. Give me another chance. You have to have that fairness. You have to have that ability. So when a person is deprived of that, they have to get an attorney to stand up for them.
And James, how do students misunderstand their rights in these situations?
A lot of students are good at using the internet for social contacts, and they can find anything about what's going on in town on the internet, but they can't look at their own school, or they're somehow reluctant to look at their own school and find out what their rights are. But 99% of the colleges and universities have these rules laid out in their own website, or sometimes it's in what's called the student handbook. Sometimes it's called the catalog. It's just in different places, but it's there. These are not oral traditions that are passed on by word of mouth and vary from instructor to instructor or administrator to administrator and student to student. They're uniform rules and they're almost always there. So that's the first thing that I try to do when a student contacts me is look up the rules, because they're slightly different or sometimes markedly different for every different institution. But you got to know what are the rules. And once I do that, I say one of the first questions I ask myself, and I try to answer, is what's the deadline for filing some kind of appeal? Sometimes we're at the last day, so we have to just throw something together that day or that evening and get it in before midnight to meet the deadline. It's better to have a average appeal on time than a great appeal one day late.
James, can you share with us what the consequences are for a school when it does not follow those procedures?
Well, that's exactly what happened in the school that we dealt with, and we had to go through that whole process, and we had to go up to the Court of Appeal before we won. So the school had to pay its attorneys to get that far and lose, but that cost them money. They didn't help their reputation any to go through that and have their name associated with unfairness. And then they had to uh, give the student the opportunity that, like they should have had way back when it started. So the consequences are not good for a college. They're much better off in following the law the right way to begin with.
And then what options does a student have to challenge a decision that was made without proper process?
The first thing I do is I write to the school and I remind them about this case, and I remind them what California law is. And I ask them what happened in this case. Like, if I can't find, for example, where their rules are or what their fair process is, I ask them, where is your process set forth? Where on the web? What's a link to your rules? And I asked them, how come those rules weren't followed? And if they don't have those rules, I say, why don't we have a meeting or some kind of fair exchange where the student can at least tell you his or her side of the situation? And let's do something that will result in a win-win situation. Instead of them being dismissed, some way to remediate, make up for it, get back in the flow. Sometimes it means they have to wait till the next semester or the next term if they've missed classes, because you don't want to set up your client to fail. You don't want to get them back into school only to have a terrible grade because they've missed so much that it's impossible for them to catch up and do their best work.
And then, James, what typically determines whether a student is able to successfully challenge a school's decision?
The most important thing is to do it timely. Don't let it go by with a long time. Get on it right away. Jump on it. Get it to the attorney. And the attorney needs to jump on it. And the attorney needs to, the sooner you look into this and the sooner you reach out. Sometimes I get contacted by a professor, usually not the professor, but an administrator or an attorney for the school, either someone on staff who's their attorney, who's maybe the vice chancellor, or the provost, who's also a JD, an attorney, and does that kind of thing for the school, or sometimes it's outside counsel. And I welcome this because counsel knows the rules, they know the law, and oftentimes it's much easier to deal with them because they don't want to put their own client behind the 8 ball, and they realize that it's best if counsel can work things out, and sometimes we can short circuit it and not even go through the formal procedure. Sometimes we can reach an understanding and work something out and even save having to go through the formal process. But the formal process is still better than a dismissal without any process.
James, I want to thank you for your time today. This was a very clear explanation on how this process works, and we appreciate you sharing it with us.
Thank you.
That's it for today's episode. From students to licensed professionals, protecting your rights with James Kosnett. If you or your family are dealing with a college disciplinary issue or facing a potential dismissal, visit educationlawyer.org to learn more or schedule a free consultation. Thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.